The Unblocked Heart, Loving Yourself Without Permission. Introduction. Do you sense it? That subtle resonance beneath the fabric of your days, a persistent murmur suggesting you fall short? It's a familiar pang, isn't it? A shadow that clings to moments of elation, casting doubt upon accomplishments and weaving insecurities into the quiet tapestry of night. We are inherently designed for connection, for the seeking of affirmation. We turn to others to fill our perceived voids, to mirror our worth back to us, to assure us that we are, indeed, adequate. And nowhere is this pursuit of external validation more potent, more deeply etched into our being, than within the crucible of our earliest relationships. But what transpires when the very wellsprings from which we seek love and validation also become the sources of our most profound wounds? What becomes of us when the absent yes from a parent, a partner, or a significant figure transforms into the very impediment to our own capacity for self-love? Our odyssey towards self-love often commences in the cradle. The manner in which we are perceived, heard, and esteemed, or conversely, disregarded, by our primary caregivers establishes the bedrock upon which we construct our self-perception. When affection is withheld, offered conditionally, or accompanied by critique, we absorb a perilous lesson that our intrinsic value is negotiable, susceptible to the whims of external circumstances. We frequently find ourselves engaged in a silent, internal arbitration with those who have inflicted pain. We meticulously replay past interactions, yearning for an altered resolution, a word of contrition, a gesture of acknowledgement. In this relentless yearning, we inadvertently cede immense dominion over our own internal cosmos. We become convinced that their validation constitutes the missing fragment, the sole barrier separating us from self-acceptance. This is the genesis of an insidious cycle. When the love we crave fails to materialize from without, we can, paradoxically, turn that unfulfilled longing inward. We commence to castigate ourselves, to impose penance for not being enough, a stark reflection of the conditional affection we received or conspicuously failed to receive. We learn to detest ourselves because it is the only form of love we have been shown, the sole method we possess for processing our pain. Envision a child suddenly bereft of their guardians. Would their inherent worth dissipate? Would they cease to be a complete, deserving human being simply because their parents are no longer present? Assuredly not. Yet, in our adult lives, we often cling tenaciously to the notion that the absence of parental approval or the lingering presence of parental injury renders us fundamentally incomplete, unworthy of our own affection. This book stands as an overture to a profound act of self-emancipation. It is an exploration and embrace of unconditional self-love. This is not an indulgence in ego or an exhibition of arrogance. It is the recognition of your inherent value, your inherent completeness, your fundamental goodness, not as something to be laboriously earned, but as an intrinsic truth that simply is. It is a love that requires no reciprocation, a love that stands unyielding against the tide of anyone else's approval, most especially from those who have been the architects of your pain. The true revolution lies in grasping that the power to love oneself resides not in the pronouncements or actions of others, but within the very core of your being. It is the reclamation of sovereignty over your own heart, the realization that you require no external dispensation, not from your parents, not from former partners, not even from the relentless voice of your inner critic, to feel deserving, to feel cherished, to feel whole. This is the very essence of no conditions. It signifies the acknowledgement that while words of affirmation or gestures of apology might be welcome, their absence does not, and indeed cannot, erect a barrier to your self-love. Your self-love is not a prize to be awarded. It is your inalienable birthright. When we shatter the shackles of conditional affection and wholeheartedly embrace unconditional self-love, we unlock a profound and abiding sense of peace. The relentless striving, the anxious pursuit, the self-inflicted wounds begin to mend. We become whole, not by attempting to fill an emptiness with external validation, but by recognizing the inherent fullness that already resides within us. Within the ensuing pages, we shall embark on a transformative expedition of unblocking. We will meticulously examine the subtle stratagems by which we relinquish our power, the deeply ingrained patterns that tether us to external validation, and the potent practices that cultivate a profound and unshakable love for ourselves. We will learn to dismantle the internal fortifications that have held us captive and to erect a bulwark of self-worth that is utterly impregnable. This book is far more than a mere compilation of concepts. It is an earnest invitation to cast your gaze inward, to challenge the limiting narratives that have constrained you, and to claim that inherent love that is your birthright. The time has arrived to unblock your heart, to love yourself without seeking external permission, and to step fully into the wholeness and tranquility that you unequivocally deserve. You are complete. You are deserving of love. And you are, and have always been, sufficiently good. Let us commence. Chapter 1. Understanding Self-Worth. 1. Defining self-worth. We are often conditioned to believe that our intrinsic value is a prize to be won, a salary earned through diligent effort. We may internalize the notion that our worth is contingent upon academic accolades, parental commendation, or the admiration of peers. This pervasive belief that our value is inextricably linked to our achievements or the perceptions of others is deeply ingrained. It operates as a formidable mental habit, a narrative so frequently repeated by society, family, and even our own inner critic that it solidifies into what feels like an immutable truth. But what if this foundational belief is, in fact, one of the most profound impediments to cultivating inner peace and genuine self-love? What if your inherent worth is not a performance to be perfected, but a fundamental state of being, present simply by virtue of your existence? This is the cornerstone of our exploration toward unconditional self-acceptance. It necessitates a deliberate recalibration of our focus, shifting from an outward-gazing validation to an inward-dwelling recognition. Consider the nascent state of a newborn. Before they can articulate a single word, before they can even maintain a steady gaze, they possess an inherent preciousness. Their value is not tethered to their capabilities or their capacity to please. They are loved and deemed worthy simply for being alive. This is the primal, unadulterated state of existence. Somewhere along the trajectory of our growth, this fundamental truth begins to recede. We start to accumulate stipulations for our worth. We learn that silence equates to goodness, that a promotion signifies success, that parental pride validates our existence. These are all external metrics, and when these benchmarks are unmet, or when the arbiters of approval withdraw their favor, we experience a profound sense of diminished worth. This is often the genesis of deep-seated pain. Many of us have endured profound hurt at the hands of those closest to us, particularly our parents. When those who were meant to be our sanctuary instead become the source of our anguish, it can feel like a direct assault on our very essence. We may internalize their critiques, their neglect, or their conditional affection, leading us to believe that we are fundamentally flawed or unworthy. This can manifest in pronouncements such as, "I only feel good about myself when my parents approve," or "if only they would express their love, then I would know I am worthy." But why do we defer to their pronouncements? Why do we cede such dominion over our self-perception? This is the crux of an unnecessary impediment. We await a decree of our own inherent value, a validation from individuals who may lack the capacity to bestow it, or worse, who have actively contributed to our suffering. This reliance on external validation, particularly from those who have inflicted pain, is akin to attempting to fill a sieve. No matter the volume of praise or approval poured in, it never suffices, for the source of worth is external, and consequently inherently unstable. The approval of others, especially those who have wounded us, offers a precarious foundation for self-esteem, akin to constructing a dwelling upon shifting sands. The undeniable reality is that your worth is not a contingent gift, bestowed or revoked by another. It is an intrinsic quality, a profound and unwavering self-acceptance and appreciation that resides within you, independent of any external circumstance. This is the very essence of unconditional self-love. It signifies the recognition that your value is complete and whole, precisely as you are in this very moment. It requires no permission, demands no earning, and is utterly unswayed by the opinions or actions of others, past or present. Consider the phenomenon of learned behavior that stems from parental trauma. When we are subjected to criticism or conditional affection from our parents, we unconsciously associate our worth with their approval. This can foster behavioral patterns designed to secure that approval, or even cultivate a form of self-recrimination, sometimes termed loving, hating yourself. In essence, we internalize their critical commentary and begin to judge ourselves with the same harshness we experienced. We might fall prey to the thought, I must be a bad person because my parent consistently told me so. However, this is a learned response, not a reflection of your fundamental, innate worth. Your worth is distinct from your actions, your missteps, and even the painful experiences you have endured. You can err, you can possess imperfections, you can have been wounded and still embody a person of immeasurable, unassailable value. The psychological toll of believing our worth is tethered to external factors is staggering. It precipitates a perpetual state of anxiety, comparison, and disappointment. We become performance-driven, perpetually seeking the next accomplishment or encomium to bolster our fragile sense of self. We exist in a state of fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of inadequacy. This relentless pursuit of external validation engenders a self-perpetuating cycle. The more we seek it, the more dependent we become, and when it is absent or supplanted by critique, we are consumed by a profound sense of emptiness and worthlessness. This cycle can precipitate self-destructive behaviors, such as people-pleasing, perfectionism, or even self-sabotage, all in a desperate bid to attain that elusive external affirmation. Therefore, how do we commence the process of recognizing and affirming our own worth, particularly when confronted by the lingering echoes of past hurts or criticisms? It begins with a conscious commitment to reframe our perspective. It involves redirecting our attention inward and attuning ourselves to a different voice, the voice of our inherent value. This transformation is not instantaneous. It is a practice, a journey of unlearning ingrained habits and cultivating new ones. The initial step involves challenging the deeply entrenched societal conditioning that equates our worth with our achievements. Reflect on the messages we absorb from an early age. You'll be somebody when you grow up. Be the best. Don't let anyone get ahead of you. These pronouncements, though often well-intentioned, subtly imprint upon us the notion that our value is conditional. We are valued for our potential, our performance, our capacity to compete and triumph. This fosters a societal landscape where individuals often feel perpetually under scrutiny, their worth assessed by their resume, their financial standing, or their digital footprint. We are encouraged to measure ourselves against others, a guaranteed pathway to feelings of inadequacy. When we internalize the understanding that self-worth is not earned, but innate, we can begin to dismantle these external expectations. We can start to perceive that our inherent value is not diminished by a workplace misstep, a disagreement with a friend, or a perceived relational failure. These are all integral facets of the human experience, woven into the intricate and beautiful tapestry of life. They do not define our core being. The true barometer of self-worth resides in internal validation. This is the capacity to regard oneself, with all imperfections and past experiences, and affirm, I am whole. I am enough. I deserve love and respect, precisely as I am. This is not an exercise in arrogance or delusion. It is a quiet, confident assurance of one's inherent goodness. It is the recognition that you are a complex, unique individual possessing your own thoughts, emotions, and experiences, and that these attributes alone render you worthy. Consider the common affirmations: you are whole, you deserve love. And you are good enough. These are not mere platitudes. They are potent declarations of truth that require internalization. When we engage in internal validation, we are, in essence, offering ourselves the same assurances that an unconditionally loving parent or friend might provide. This is the internal power to which this discourse refers. It is the capacity to be your own wellspring of love and acceptance. When confronted with past traumas, it can be profoundly challenging to disentangle our innate worth from the pain we have endured. If a parent consistently disparaged your appearance, it is facile to conclude that you are, indeed, unattractive. If they were perpetually absent, it is easy to feel insignificant, unworthy of their attention. These are the wounds that necessitate healing. However, the crucial insight is to recognize that the hurt is real, the behavior of the other person was unacceptable, but your inherent worth remains inviolate. Your worth is not a reflection of how you were treated. It is a fundamental aspect of your being. The practice of internal validation involves the active challenging of negative self-talk that arises from past hurts. When that critical inner voice interjects, asserting, "You are not good enough," you can gently, yet firmly, counter, that is, a learned belief, not a truth about my worth. It is about cultivating a new internal dialogue, one characterized by compassion and affirmation. This is where gentle persistence becomes paramount. It is not about forcing oneself into a state of perceived well-being, but about patiently guiding oneself toward a more truthful and benevolent perspective. This journey of defining self-worth as an innate quality, distinct from external validation, is profoundly liberating. It signifies that even if those who have inflicted pain never offer an apology, never alter their behavior, or never bestow the approval you once craved, you remain whole. You continue to be deserving of love. Your worth is not contingent upon their actions or their acknowledgement. This realization does not serve to excuse their conduct or absolve them of responsibility. It is about reclaiming your personal power. It is about understanding that their actions and opinions are a reflection of them, not a definition of you. When we truly internalize the understanding that our worth is not bound by external factors, we begin to liberate ourselves from the incessant need for approval. We can then commence making choices predicated on what genuinely resonates with us, rather than what we perceive others expect. We can embrace risks, exhibit vulnerability, and express ourselves authentically, secure in the knowledge that our value is not imperiled. This represents the pathway to an unburdened heart, a heart capable of self-love without requiring external sanction. It is a journey of recognizing the inherent goodness and completeness that has resided within you all along, awaiting acknowledgement. Once we comprehend that our worth is not a commodity to be bartered for external approval, but an unshakable internal truth, the subsequent critical phase involves exploring how we can actively cultivate this intrinsic sense of value. This necessitates an examination of the internal narratives we have constructed, and the manner in which they either fortify or undermine our innate worth. 2. The roots of self-love. We often enter existence as unwritten pages, poised for self-discovery. Yet, this journey of understanding unfolds not in isolation, but within the intricate tapestry of human connection. From our earliest breaths, we begin to absorb profound lessons about our identity, our intrinsic value, and our capacity for love, primarily from those closest to us. Envision this as the sowing of seeds. The foundational seeds of your self-perception, your inherent worth, are most often planted by parents or the guiding adults who nurtured your nascent life. These initial custodians, through their pronouncements, their gestures, and even their silences, impart messages about your significance. At times, these communications are luminous and unambiguous, akin to the life-giving embrace of sunshine and gentle rain, fostering a profound sense of innate goodness and lovability. More frequently, however, these conveyed messages can be a complex admixture, even an enigma. Imagine a gardener tending a delicate bloom, sometimes bestowing meticulous care and ample water, at other times neglecting it, or, worse, inadvertently trampling its fragile form. The flower retains its inherent potential for flourishing, yet its growth is impeded, and it learns to anticipate an erratic regimen of care. This is the genesis of what I term a borrowed sense of self-worth. It is not a discovery unearthed from within. Rather, it is a gift bestowed, or more accurately, a perception shape, by the affirmations, or lack thereof, from others. If parental praise was contingent upon academic triumphs, one might internalize the belief that value is inextricably linked to achievement. If criticism was the prevailing tone, the ingrained message could be one of perpetual inadequacy. If emotional availability was scarce, the learned lesson might be that one's feelings are inconsequential, or that connection is not a deserved entitlement. These nascent imprints become the roots of self-regard, or more precisely, the bedrock of your conviction regarding your capacity for self-love. And if these roots are shallow or fractured, the flourishing of authentic, profound self-love becomes an arduous, if not insurmountable, endeavor. The inherent vulnerability of this borrowed self-worth lies in its fundamental conditionality. It is invariably tethered to stipulations. You are deemed worthy if you achieve success. You are considered lovable if you remain quiescent. You are good if you conform to my desires. This relentless litany of ifs engenders a deep-seated anxiety. We navigate our lives perpetually striving to satisfy these unspoken or articulated prerequisites, desperately seeking an external validation that we believe will finally imbue us with a genuine sense of value. It is akin to attempting to fill a vessel riddled with leaks. No matter the volume of liquid poured in, it never attains fullness because the fissures are ever present. This is where the concept of unnecessary barriers emerges, as we have previously alluded. One of the most significant impediments to self-love is the conviction that one requires something external to feel worthy. And all too often, our gaze turns towards those very individuals who may have originally contributed to our sense of unworthiness. We might harbor the thought, if only my mother would offer an apology, or if only my father would acknowledge my pain, or if only they perceived me differently, then I would finally find solace within myself. We relinquish the reins of our self-esteem, subscribing to the fallacy that their endorsement is the sole currency of significance. However, this is a profound illusion. It is a sophisticated ruse orchestrated by our minds, as it offers a more palatable narrative to attribute the source of our distress to external forces to them rather than confronting the deeply entrenched beliefs residing within us. The unvarnished truth is that the power to feel worthy, to feel lovable, does not reside in the opinions or actions of any other individual. It resides inherently within you. Consider an infant's cry of hunger. The infant does not require maternal permission, a declaration of you are permitted to be hungry, for the hunger to be real or for the infant to deserve sustenance. Hunger is a natural state, and the need for nourishment is an intrinsic entitlement. Similarly, your worthiness is a natural state, and your deservingness of love is an inherent birthright. In our formative years, we exist in a state of absolute dependence on our caregivers. Our very survival is predicated on their attentiveness and provision. Consequently, it is natural that we internalize the messages they convey about us. If a caregiver consistently offers love and acceptance, even in the face of our errors, we learn that we are inherently lovable. We grasp that mistakes are an integral aspect of the human condition, not grounds for the withdrawal of affection. This cultivates a robust foundation for self-love. We may falter, we may fall, but we possess an intrinsic certainty, a deep-seated knowing that we remain deserving of love, both from ourselves and from others. Conversely, if our early experiences were characterized by censure, neglect, or conditional affection, those negative pronouncements can sow seeds of doubt and unworthiness. These seeds, nurtured by repeated encounters, can burgeon into deeply entrenched convictions. You may begin to believe that you are fundamentally flawed, that you are perpetually insufficient, or that love must be perpetually earned. These beliefs become so deeply ingrained that they masquerade as fundamental truths about your being, rather than as learned patterns of perception. Let us consider a common tableau. Imagine a child, whom we shall call Maya, possessed of a naturally sensitive and imaginative disposition. Her parents, however, are resolutely pragmatic, valuing academic achievement above all else. When Maya dedicates hours to her artistic endeavors or to crafting narratives, her parents might respond with a sigh and an inquiry, "That's lovely, Maya, but have you completed your mathematics homework?" Or perhaps, "When will you learn to engage in something of practical value?" Maya, yearning to please her parents and seeking their approbation, may begin to internalize the belief that her creative passions lack inherent value. She may relegate them to the periphery, focusing her energies exclusively on her studies, even if this path engenders unhappiness. She learns that her worth is inextricably bound to her academic performance, rather than to the unique essence of her spirit. This marks the nascent stage of conditional self-worth. She may be loved, perhaps, but not for the totality of her being. Years hence, Maya might attain considerable academic distinction. She might secure a prestigious position, command a substantial income, and command the respect of her professional peers. Yet, a persistent, knowing sense of emptiness may linger within her. She might be plagued by a constant fear of failure, or feel an enduring sense of inadequacy, perpetually apprehensive that her secret deficiencies will be exposed. This is the enduring legacy of those early, conditional pronouncements. The external validation she receives, the promotions, the accolades from her superiors, offers only transient solace. It is akin to applying a superficial dressing to a profound wound. It conceals the surface, but fails to address the underlying damage. This is precisely why seeking validation from those who may have inflicted our pain constitutes such an unnecessary impediment. When our sense of worth is inextricably linked to their approval, we cede to them an immense dominion over our emotional equilibrium. We are, in essence, proclaiming, "My capacity to feel lovable is contingent upon your assurance that I am." But what if they are incapable of offering such validation? What if they remain ensnared by their own ingrained patterns, their own suffering, and are fundamentally unable to perceive our worth with clarity? Does this imply that our worth ceases to exist? Assuredly not. Contemplate this analogy. If you possess a magnificent painting and an observer passes by and declares, "That is a dreadful painting," does it diminish the painting's inherent beauty? Its aesthetic merit exists independently of that individual's opinion. The same principle applies to your worth. Your intrinsic value as a human being is not diminished by another's judgment, criticism, or lack of acknowledgement. The predicament arises when we have so thoroughly internalized those negative judgments that we begin to assent to them ourselves. The roots of self-love, therefore, are not discovered in the arid soil of external approbation. They are found within the fertile expanse of our own being. This subheading is dedicated to the gentle excavation of those early influences, not for the purpose of assigning blame, but for the pursuit of understanding. It is about recognizing that the messages we absorbed as children, the conditional affection we may have experienced, and the ceaseless pursuit of external validation have all collectively shaped our self-perception. As we comprehend these foundational influences, we can begin to discern how they have molded our present patterns. We can initiate a process of questioning the beliefs we have inherited. For instance, if you were frequently admonished to remain silent and unobtrusive, you might now find yourself struggling to advocate for your own needs. You may harbor a fear that asserting your desires will precipitate rejection. This apprehension is a direct outgrowth of that early conditioning. The belief that your voice lacks import or that it is perilous to express yourself has taken root. The critical inquiries we must pose to ourselves at this juncture are profoundly personal. The first is, how have the expectations and behaviors of primary caregivers, parents, guardians directly shaped my initial understanding of my own worth and lovability? Take a moment for introspection. Recall specific instances. Was there a moment of profound pride, and how did your caregivers respond? Was there an occasion when you erred, and how were you treated? Were you lauded for being good, or for achieving success? Were you offered solace when distressed, or instructed to stop crying? Refrain from judging these recollections. Simply observe them. Discern the patterns. Did their approval feel like a reward for conforming to a particular mold, rather than a natural expression of love for who you are? Did their disappointment feel like a condemnation of your core being, rather than a reaction to a specific action? The second question is, in what specific ways have I consciously or unconsciously sought external validation from others to feel good enough, and what underlying fear or belief about my inherent value does this behavior reveal? This requires an examination of your current actions. Do you find yourself compulsively checking social media for affirmations? Do you over-prepare for conversations anticipating compliments? Do you circumvent conflict, even when experiencing unhappiness, out of a fear of disapproval? Do you experience a surge of relief when praised, and a profound sense of unease when such praise is absent? Each of these behaviors serves as a crucial indicator. They point to an underlying belief that your worth is not an inherent given. They expose a fear that, without this external affirmation, you might be insufficient. Recognizing these patterns is not an exercise in dwelling on the past or assigning culpability. It is about cultivating clarity. It is about understanding that many of the beliefs we hold about ourselves were not born from our own inner knowing, but were implanted by others. They are akin to outmoded garments that no longer fit, or a map that leads to an erroneous destination. They served a purpose at one time, perhaps even facilitated our survival, but they are no longer conducive to our growth. The inherent beauty of comprehending these origins lies in its empowering nature. It reveals that these deeply ingrained beliefs are not necessarily the definitive truth of our being. They are learned behaviors, learned interpretations. And just as we acquired them, we possess the capacity to unlearn them. We can commence the process of pruning away the unhealthy roots that have stifled our capacity for self-love and begin to cultivate new ones nourished by our own intrinsic worth. Having meticulously examined the often external and conditional origins from which our initial sense of worth springs, we can now perceive how these inherited beliefs can become profoundly entrenched. However, just as roots can be pruned and redirected, so too can our understanding of self-worth undergo a transformative metamorphosis. The subsequent step involves embarking on the process of unearthing these old patterns and planting the seeds for self-love that is not beholden to the approval of others, but rather blossoms organically from within. 3. Parental influence on self-value. From the nascent stirrings of existence, we are akin to delicate sponges, absorbing the world around us. And who commands a more central position in our nascent universe, who wields greater sway than our progenitors or those who nurtured us? They are our inaugural instructors, our initial navigators, and, in a profound sense, the first mirrors into which we gaze, to apprehend ourselves. This is precisely why comprehending the architecture of parental influence upon our self-regard is of paramount importance. It is akin to scrutinizing the bedrock of a dwelling. Should that foundation prove precarious, the entire edifice risks a perilous tilt. Envision your parents or your primary guardians as the inaugural artisans of your self-perception. They did not merely bestow life. They also, often with an unconscious hand, commenced the meticulous rendering of your identity in your own estimation. Their pronouncements, their gestures, even their silences became the palette and brushstrokes upon that nascent canvas. If a parent consistently lauded your endeavors, exulted in your modest triumphs, and provided a secure haven for your sorrows, they were likely painting a portrait of a capable, cherished, and inherently worthy child. This can cultivate a robust, salubrious sense of self-worth, as unshakable as a well-constructed edifice. Yet, for many, the unfolding narrative is one of greater complexity. At times, the artistry rendered by our caregivers leaned less toward unreserved acceptance and more toward stipulated conditions. Perhaps commendation was dispensed only upon the attainment of a specific academic benchmark, the triumph in a competition, or the exhibition of conduct that reflected favorably upon them. It is conceivable that critique overshadowed encouragement, leaving you with the pervasive sensation of perpetual inadequacy. Or perhaps affection and attention were parceled out capriciously, bestowed solely when unspoken expectations were met, fostering the conviction that love was a commodity to be earned, not an intrinsic birthright. These experiences, even if devoid of malicious intent, can indelibly mark our developing self-concept. They can imbue us, from tender years, with the understanding that our value is not a given, it is a prize to be incessantly pursued, rigorously proven, and vigilantly defended. Herein lies the profound potency of the mirror metaphor. When a child gazes upon their parent, they seek cues to their own being. Should the parent's reflection within that mirror betray disappointment, impatience, or conditional affection, the child's internal reflection begins to absorb those very qualities. They commence to internalize the notion that they are the locus of the problem, that they are the ones deficient. It is not that the child is fundamentally flawed, rather, the mirror they were presented was askew, and as we mature, we frequently carry these distorted reflections forward, continuing to perceive ourselves through the prism of those formative encounters. These early imprints do not evanesce with the advent of adulthood. They frequently transmute into internalized dictums, a sort of parental script that plays on an unending loop within our minds. You may detect the reproving timbre of your mother's voice when you falter, or the disappointed exhalation of your father when you fall short of an established standard, even when their physical presence is long absent. These parental scripts possess formidable influence. They shape our internal dialogues, color our interpretation of events, and guide our decision-making processes. We might find ourselves unconsciously compelled to appease these internalized arbiters, or perpetually apprehensive of their judgment, even when the original source of these pronouncements has long since receded. It is akin to harboring a diminutive auditor within your consciousness, incessantly appraising your every action against a rubric devised years prior. This ceaseless striving, this conviction that our worth is contingent, constitutes a significant impediment to unconditional self-love. Recall, unconditional self-love embodies the profound, unwavering acceptance and appreciation of oneself, irrespective of circumstance. It signifies an intrinsic understanding of one's value, divorced from the necessity of its acquisition. Yet, when our early experiences instilled the belief that love and worth were earned commodities, the notion of being worthy, simply by virtue of existence, becomes profoundly elusive. We become ensnared in a cycle of performance, achievement, and the relentless pursuit of perfection, all in the fervent hope of finally attaining a state of enoughness. This relentless quest for external validation, born from the crucible of early conditional acceptance, can leave us feeling perpetually depleted and unfulfilled. Consider the narrative of Sarah. Sarah's upbringing was characterized by parents who placed an immense premium on achievement. Her academic reports were perpetually subjected to scrutiny, and praise was invariably tethered to exceptional grades or accolades. A failure to perform flawlessly elicited parental disappointment, not through overt anger, but through a subdued, weighty sigh that resonated more acutely than any outburst. In adulthood, Sarah found herself perpetually overextended, paralyzed by the fear of making errors in her professional life. Even when her supervisor offered commendation, she would dismiss it, rationalizing, "They are unaware of the full picture. They cannot perceive how precariously I am maintaining equilibrium." The internalized voice of her parents, proclaiming that her worth was inextricably linked to her performance, continued to dictate her self-perception. She remained trapped in a futile endeavor to secure the love and approbation she felt had been inadequately conferred during her formative years. Sarah's predicament illuminates a critical truth: the enduring legacy of unmet needs. When parental love, acceptance, or validation was scarce, inconsistent, or conditional, it can engrave a profound void within us. This void may manifest as a persistent emptiness, a gnawing sensation, that something essential is absent, we might experience a pervasive feeling of not enoughness, a conviction that no matter the extent of our efforts, that chasm will remain unfilled. This often propels us to seek external remedies, searching for something or someone to assuage that deficit. We may pursue validation in romantic entanglements, professional triumphs, or the opinions of our peers, harboring the hope that they can furnish the unconditional acceptance we were denied. However, the reality is that external sources can offer only transient solace. They cannot address the fundamental cause of that unmet need. The sole enduring resolution lies in cultivating the capacity to provide that unconditional acceptance for ourselves. This is why an exploration of parental influence is not an exercise in assigning culpability. It is not an indictment, a declaration of you are the architect of my present state. Our parents, in their time, acted with the resources and understanding available to them. Many were likely grappling with their own unhealed traumas and ingrained patterns. The purpose of examining this influence is to foster self-awareness. It is about recognizing the genesis of specific self-worth paradigms that may be impeding your progress. Once you comprehend the why behind your emotional responses or behavioral patterns, you gain the agency to consciously challenge those learned behaviors and convictions. You can embark on the process of rewriting those antiquated parental scripts and forging a new personal narrative, one grounded in your inherent value. Let us delve more deeply into the mechanisms by which these parental dynamics sculpt our self-perception. Consider the distinct communication styles you encountered. How did the specific communication styles, verbal and nonverbal, of your primary caregiver shape your initial understanding of your own value? Were they individuals who readily offered encouragement? Or was feedback frequently delivered with a critical undertone? Did they express affection with ease, or did it feel like a scarce resource, dispensed only on select occasions or when your comportment was particularly exemplary? Imagine a parent who perpetually juxtaposes their child against others. Why can't you emulate your sister? She consistently achieves top marks. Such a child might internalize the belief that they are inherently less astute or less capable than their peers, and that their own accomplishments, however significant, are insufficient. Or consider a parent who trivializes a child's emotions. Do not be so melodramatic. It is not that dire. This teaches the child that their feelings are invalidated, that their experiences hold no weight, and that they ought to suppress their genuine sentiments. Over time, this can engender a profound estrangement from one's inner landscape and the conviction that their emotions and needs are undeserving of attention. Conversely, a parent who dispenses consistent, genuine praise for effort, not solely for the outcome, fosters resilience. When a child is told, "I observe the diligence you invested in that drawing and I adore the hues you selected," they learn that their exertion is esteemed and that their unique expressiveness is cherished. This cultivates a sense of competence and self-acceptance. Similarly, a parent who offers solace and understanding when a child is distressed, stating, "It is permissible to experience sadness. I am here for you," teaches the child that their emotions are valid and that they merit care and support. This lays the groundwork for robust emotional regulation and a fortified sense of self-worth. Now, let us examine the internalized voices. To what extent do you find yourself still seeking approval or fearing judgment from internalized parental figures in your adult life, and in what specific situations does this manifest? This is a pivotal inquiry, as it bridges the chasm between past and present. Are there instances when you hesitate to articulate your thoughts in a meeting, perhaps hearing an echo of a parent cautioning you to remain silent or to refrain from excessive assertiveness? Do you find yourself perpetually soliciting compliments from your partner or friends, yearning for them to affirm your adequacy, a pattern that may have its origins in a parent who seldom offered such affirmations? Perhaps you find yourself in a new romantic relationship, bending over backward to appease your partner, mirroring a dynamic where you felt compelled to achieve perfection to secure your parents' affection. Or maybe you shy away from embracing risks, such as launching a new venture or pursuing a creative passion, out of apprehension of the imagined disapproval of a parent who consistently prioritizes security and pragmatism. These are not invariably conscious choices. They are frequently deeply ingrained habits of thought and behavior, automatic responses triggered by circumstances that echo the dynamics of your childhood. Recognizing these patterns is akin to illuminating a darkened chamber. Suddenly, the furniture, the obstacles, and the pathways you were navigating blindly become visible. The paramount objective here is to observe these patterns without succumbing to self-recrimination. When you detect yourself seeking validation or anticipating censure, pause. Pose the question, whose voice am I currently perceiving? Is this my own authentic sentiment, or is it an echo from my past? More often than not, you will discover it to be the latter. This realization is profoundly empowering. It signifies that the voice you are hearing does not represent the absolute truth of your being. It is a learned response. And learned responses are susceptible to unlearning. This process of unlearning is fundamental to cultivating unconditional self-love. It involves dismantling the conviction that your worth is contingent upon external forces, whether those forces are the opinions of others, your accomplishments, or the approbation of your parents, past or present. Unconditional self-love does not necessitate the erasure of the past or the denial of arduous experiences. It entails acknowledging the impact of those experiences and then consciously electing to construct a new foundation for your self-worth, one that is entirely internal and immutable. It signifies an understanding that your value is not alone subject to recall. It is an intrinsic endowment, a birthright. When we wholeheartedly embrace unconditional self-love, we begin to perceive our parents' influence not as an immutable sentence, but as a chapter within our personal saga. We can acknowledge the love and care they did provide, while simultaneously recognizing the areas where they fell short and comprehending how those deficiencies may have shaped us. This comprehension liberates us from the imperative need for their validation or the dread of their disapproval, because we realize that our own internal validation is the sole arbiter of our wholeness and serenity. The journey toward unconditional self-love is a reclamation of those facets of ourselves that were obscured or overlooked due to early conditioning. It is an understanding that the capacity for profound, unwavering self-acceptance resides inherently within you. It requires no external conferral, not even from those who served as your initial mentors. Your worth is not a gift to be bestowed, it is a truth to be unveiled. While the reverberations of parental influence are undeniable and often deeply ingrained, identifying their origins represents the initial stride toward reclaiming your inherent value. The subsequent crucial step involves comprehending how these early imprints have been further molded and solidified by the broader world surrounding us, and how we can commence the conscious process of unlearning these limiting beliefs. 4. Breaking free from validation. We often internalize the notion that our worth is akin to a grade bestowed by others. Parents, educators, even peers can become arbiters of our adequacy. Consequently, we learn to scan faces for approval, to attune our ears to praise, and to flinch from criticism. This can manifest as a perpetual monitoring of an internal meter that quantifies our value, leaving us buoyant when it's full and diminished when it's empty. Such dependence on external opinion renders us precarious, akin to navigating a frozen lake. This yearning for validation becomes particularly agonizing when it is directed towards those who have inflicted pain. Consider the paradox. If individuals have systematically diminished you, and you still harbor the hope that they will suddenly recognize your inherent worth and articulate it, you are ensnared in a profound predicament. It resembles thirsting for water from a parched well. The hope persists that their affirmation will somehow cauterize old wounds, that their present yes will obliterate their past no. More often than not, however, this pursuit merely entrenches the belief that their approval is indispensable for our well-being, and that their prior judgment might possess an unsettling kernel of truth. This is a cyclical trap, perpetually reaching for an elixir that offers no lasting solace, and worse, granting those who have wounded us the power to define our very essence. Why do we cede this authority? Why do we await their pronouncements on our worth when the capacity to know it resides within us? This incessant quest for external validation, particularly from those who have caused us suffering, stands in stark opposition to that principle of self-love untethered by external decree. Unconditional self-love is the profound and unwavering acceptance and appreciation of oneself, irrespective of external circumstances or the opinions of others. It is an internal resonance, a quiet certainty of inherent completeness and worth. When our sense of self-worth hinges on another's nod or kind words, our self-love is demonstrably conditional, a fragile construct, susceptible to the vagaries of external opinion. The desire for validation from any quarter erects an immense, unnecessary barrier between ourselves and the profound peace of knowing we are sufficient. It is akin to seeking warmth by clutching a depiction of a fire rather than by standing within its embrace. The undeniable truth is that your worth is not a commodity to be earned or a gift to be bestowed by another. It is an intrinsic endowment, a hidden treasure residing within you. No external key is required to unlock its presence. By ceasing the expectation of permission or approval from others, you begin to access this inner wellspring of power. You commence to grasp that you are whole and inherently sufficient, not because someone has declared it so, but because it is an irrefutable reality. This is the central tenet of this discourse. You need no one else. You only need yourself. This realization is profoundly liberating. It empowers you to stand with dignity, to inhabit a state of inner security, and to love yourself with an encompassing depth, irrespective of whether others perceive your radiance. Pause for a moment to examine the deeply ingrained beliefs you hold regarding your own value. Recall instances where you desperately sought the approval of another, particularly someone who has made you feel diminished. What did you believe about yourself in those moments? Did you conclude that your worth was contingent on their favor? Did you feel compelled to alter your authentic self to solicit their attention or commendation? These convictions, often forged during periods of vulnerability in our formative years, can become deeply entrenched, akin to habitual patterns of thought. When we persist in seeking validation from the very individuals who may have initially sown seeds of doubt, we are, in essence, inviting them to nourish those pernicious beliefs. This is a painful cycle, as we hope their approval will assuage past hurts, yet it often serves to reinforce the notion that we are incomplete without it. We grant them the power to diminish us, and then we implore them to restore us. This is a deeply ingrained pattern, and its dissolution necessitates an understanding of its mechanics and a conscious election of a divergent path. Let us now scrutinize how the persistent pursuit of validation from sources of past hurt actively obstructs the experience of genuine self-acceptance and wholeness. Envision a meticulously cultivated garden, only to have its blossoms repeatedly trampled. You continue to plant, harboring the hope of growth, yet you anticipate their imminent destruction. The pervasive fear of their desolation incapacitates your ability to fully appreciate the beauty of the blossoms that do manage to flourish. Similarly, when you perpetually seek approval from those who have inflicted pain, you exist in a state of anticipatory vulnerability. The preoccupation with their potential judgment or the elusive attainment of their longed-for praise prevents you from fully embracing your own inherent positive attributes. True self-acceptance remains elusive because you are perpetually awaiting an external verdict. This waiting, this hoping, this necessity of their approval constitutes a relentless distraction. It diverts your focus from your internal landscape, from the quiet, steadfast voice that intrinsically comprehends your worth. It erects a formidable barrier, a pervasive fog, obscuring your perception of your own completeness. You are relinquishing your inherent power of self-definition, thereby impeding your access to the profound, unshakable peace that arises from the certainty of your existing wholeness, your self-love, irrespective of external pronouncements or actions. This is a form of self-sabotage, a subtle yet persistent undermining of your own well-being by keeping a wound festering and dependent on the very hands that inflicted it. This is precisely why extricating oneself from the need for validation is not merely an advantageous aspiration, but an imperative. For healing, it entails the recognition that the wellspring of your worth is not external. It is not found in applause, accolades, compliments, or the acceptance of others. It resides within you. It is present in your breath, your spirit, your very existence. As you begin to reorient your focus inward, you cultivate a different caliber of fortitude. You become akin to a tree with deeply entrenched roots, capable of withstanding the tempestuous winds of criticism. You learn to trust your internal compass, your inner voice, which offers a far more reliable and benevolent guidance than any external opinion. This internal metamorphosis enables you to inhabit your life with presence, to savor joy unburdened by the gnawing fear of judgment, and to love yourself fully, unconditionally, precisely as you are, in this very moment. Comprehending the ramifications of seeking external validation, particularly from sources steeped in pain, is a pivotal step. It is akin to illuminating a shadowed corner of the heart to reveal its contents. We can perceive how we have abdicated our power, how we have deferred our right to self-acceptance until granted permission. However, this recognition is merely the nascent stage. The subsequent, and arguably most crucial, step is the active cultivation of an internal reservoir of worth. This necessitates learning to trust ourselves, to heed our own needs, and to extend ourselves the same compassion and acceptance we yearn to receive from others. It is about constructing a robust foundation of self-love that requires no external reinforcement. 5. Recognizing internal barriers. We often bear invisible weights, burdens picked up along life's winding road, that obscure our own reflection in the mirror of kindness. These are not the tangible heft of a backpack, but the subtle, internal anchors lodged deep within our thoughts and feelings. They are the unseen ramparts that prevent us from grasping the fundamental truth: our worth is not a prize to be won or a debt to be repaid. Consider the metrics by which we are taught to measure ourselves. From our earliest years, we learn that goodness is synonymous with stellar report cards, the accolades of instructors, or the proud smiles of our parents. As we mature, these benchmarks may morph into the acquisition of a prestigious career, the ownership of a desirable home, or the coveted approval of our peers. It becomes a perpetual checklist: achieve this, and then I am worthy. Attain that, and then I am valuable. This is the seductive illusion of external dependency. We begin to internalize the notion that our intrinsic value is inextricably bound to our actions, our possessions, or the opinions of others. It is a potent enchantment, so deeply woven into the fabric of our existence that it feels incontrovertible. We become akin to a delicate plant, utterly reliant on the ceaseless ministrations of sunlight and water from without. When these external nourishments cease, we begin to languish. This conviction that our worth hinges upon external validation is not innate, it is a learned behavior. Society, our formative environments, and the tapestry of our experiences collectively instill in us the habit of seeking affirmation beyond ourselves. We may observe, for instance, parents who struggled to express affection or offer praise. We might then spend years yearning for that singular nod of approval, that solitary word of commendation, that would finally extinguish the gnawing sense of inadequacy. This quest for validation from specific individuals, particularly those who have inflicted pain, can calcify into a deeply ingrained habit. It is a habit that, no matter how earnestly pursued, can never truly fill the void, for the very source of validation we seek is external, while the hunger is profoundly internal. We are, in essence, searching for a key from another to unlock a door that has been open within us all along. When we have been wounded, especially by those who were meant to be our protectors and our anchors of love, such as our parents, a profound shift can occur within. We may begin to internalize the very criticisms they leveled, or the subtle implications that conveyed our perceived shortcomings. If a parent was habitually critical, or if affection was dispensed only in conditional bursts, contingent upon flawless performance, we can absorb these messages as our own truths. It is akin to adopting their harsh pronouncements as the very cadence of our inner monologue. This internalized hurt then becomes a self-imposed barrier. Rather than releasing the judgments of others, we cling to them, and in doing so, we begin to treat ourselves with the same unforgiving gaze. We become our own most formidable accuser, echoing the very critiques that once inflicted such deep wounds. Have you ever caught yourself uttering sentiments to yourself that you would never, in a million years, direct toward a cherished friend? Perhaps you were swift to catalog your missteps, to dwell on perceived imperfections, or to harbor a persistent shame for past transgressions. This is often a telling sign that you have absorbed the voice of another or the lingering ache of a past experience and made it your own. The question, why do you love hating yourself, may sound stark, but it probes the very heart of this phenomenon. It is not an endorsement of suffering, but an acknowledgement of a deep, often unconscious, familiarity with self-recrimination. It is a learned response. When we find ourselves answering, "Because that's the first thing I learned how to do," we are admitting that this pattern of self-inflicted harm began in our nascent years, perhaps as a rudimentary strategy for coping or for navigating the complexities of our environment. It became our default setting. This self-generated torment, this ingrained habit of dismantling ourselves, stands as a formidable internal barrier to recognizing our inherent worth. We are, in effect, perpetuating the very hurt that was inflicted upon us by inflicting it upon ourselves. This leads us directly to the potent influence of unnecessary beliefs. These are the convictions we harbor about ourselves and the world that impose conditions upon our capacity for self-love. They function as unspoken decrees, establishing a framework of "I can only love myself if or I do not deserve love until." Consider these prevalent notions. I am not truly adequate until I have achieved X. This X could represent a significant career advancement, a specific financial milestone, or a notable life accomplishment. The underlying belief is that our value is contingent upon our accomplishments. I cannot embrace self-love until my parents finally acknowledge me. This exemplifies a profound reliance on external validation, particularly from sources that have caused pain. The conviction here is that our self-acceptance is held hostage by their approval, an approval that may never materialize. I am unworthy of love due to Y. This Y could be a past error, a perceived character flaw, or something that evokes a deep sense of shame. The belief is that our history or our inherent traits disqualify us from the realm of love. These beliefs, though often rooted in the fertile soil of past experiences, have long ceased to serve us. They are akin to outdated maps that lead us in endless circles, diverting us from our true destination. They foster a conditional form of self-love, which stands in stark opposition to unconditional self-love. Unconditional self-love, as we have explored, is characterized by a profound, unwavering acceptance of oneself, irrespective of circumstances. These unnecessary beliefs act as vigilant gatekeepers, demanding that we meet a predefined set of criteria before we are even permitted to extend kindness to ourselves. They are the internal obstacles that prevent us from simply existing and from recognizing our inherent worthiness. Perhaps one of the most tenacious internal barriers is the ingrained habit of seeking validation from sources that have historically caused us pain. Even when we are acutely aware that a person or situation has inflicted hurt, we can find ourselves drawn back, harboring a faint hope for a different outcome. We may meticulously replay past conversations, dissecting them for any scintilla of approval. We might actively solicit the opinions of individuals who have consistently devalued us, clinging to the notion that if they could only recognize our worth, then we would finally find solace. This is the juncture where we must confront ourselves with some unflinching questions. Why is it imperative that you hear it from them? Why do you cede such immense power to them over your own self-perception? The answer frequently resides in the deeply entrenched belief that their validation is the sole currency that truly matters, or that it represents the missing component in our journey toward self-acceptance. This is an internal pattern of seeking external affirmation, even when such affirmation is improbable or actively detrimental to our self-esteem. The yearning for this approval, coupled with the conviction that it is indispensable, constitutes the internal barrier. It ensnares us in the past and impedes our ability to recognize that our worth is not a commodity they can bestow or withdraw. Let us delve into this a little more deeply. Imagine Sarah. Sarah's father was a man of formidable intellect, but emotional austerity. He offered praise sparingly, and when he did, it was almost exclusively in response to academic triumphs. If she faltered, he would sigh or pointedly withdraw his attention, an act that, to Sarah, felt like a profound rejection. Now, as an adult, Sarah has achieved considerable professional success, yet she continues to find herself perpetually seeking her father's approval. She will forward him articles detailing her achievements, hoping for some acknowledgement, some compliment. When he offers a brief, almost perfunctory response, Sarah experiences a familiar pang of disappointment, but she will then spend days meticulously analyzing his words, searching for some hidden layer of positive affirmation. What is unfolding here? Sarah is trapped in an internal cycle. Her past experiences have imprinted upon her the belief that her father's approval is the ultimate testament to her worth. This belief, though a source of ongoing pain, has become a strangely comforting familiarity, a predictable rhythm. The barrier is not solely her father's emotional distance. It is Sarah's internal commitment to the notion that his validation is indispensable to her own sense of value. She is actively, though perhaps unconsciously, choosing to remain tethered to a source that has historically left her feeling wanting. The internal narrative is stark. If my father, a figure of such significance, does not truly perceive my value, then perhaps my value is indeed negligible. This represents a powerful internal barrier, a self-imposed limitation that prevents her from embracing her own inherent goodness. Another illustration might involve someone who endured a childhood with a critically inclined parent. Let us call this individual Alex. Alex's parent would frequently utter pronouncements such as, "You are so clumsy," or "Why can't you be more like your sister?" As an adult, Alex might find themselves habitually apologizing, even when no wrongdoing has occurred. They may exhibit an exaggerated sensitivity to any perceived criticism, interpreting even a neutral remark as a personal indictment. They might even inadvertently sabotage opportunities, driven by a fear of failure and a subconscious desire to confirm their parents' negative predictions. The internal narrative in this instance is, "I am fundamentally flawed, and I must maintain constant vigilance to avoid validating these perceived deficiencies." This deeply ingrained belief in their inherent inadequacy, absorbed from their parent, has become Alex's internal barrier. They are so accustomed to operating from a position of perceived deficiency that they struggle to accept kindness or praise. When someone offers a compliment, Alex might experience a sense of discomfort, thinking, "They don't truly know me. If they were privy to the real me, they would not utter such words." This is the internalized hurt manifesting as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Alex is so invested in the conviction of their own insufficiency that they actively repel anything that challenges this deeply held belief. The barrier is the profound conviction that they are not lovable in their present state, a conviction born from past hurts but now sustained from within. These internal barriers, the illusion of external dependency, the internalization of past hurts, the unnecessary beliefs we cling to, and the persistent inclination to seek validation from detrimental sources, are not insurmountable fortresses. They are more akin to overgrown pathways that we have become habituated to traversing. Recognizing them is the initial and perhaps most critical step. It involves gently illuminating these internal landscapes, not to cast judgment upon ourselves for inhabiting them, but to comprehend the trajectory that led us there and to realize that we possess the agency to choose a different course. As we begin to discern these patterns, we can commence the process of posing ourselves honest questions. What specific internal narratives or beliefs have I absorbed from past hurts that now dictate my sense of self-worth? How do these narratives create conditions for self-love, transforming it into something that must be earned rather than something that is inherently possessed? And in what ways am I actively or passively seeking validation from sources that have historically inflicted pain upon me? What is the underlying internal belief that propels this behavior? Answering these questions with candor may be uncomfortable, but it is also an experience of profound liberation. It is akin to a detective uncovering vital clues to a perplexing mystery. The mystery lies in our struggle to embrace self-love. The clues are these internal barriers. Once we identify them, we can begin to understand that our inherent wholeness and worth are not casualties of past experiences. They are fundamental truths awaiting our embrace, independent of any external affirmation. This leads us to the powerful realization that true self-worth is not something to be acquired, but something to be rediscovered. Chapter 2. Embracing Unconditional Self-Love. 1. Steps to Self-Acceptance. We often cast our gaze outward for affirmation, much like a child seeking the approving nod of parental recognition. This ingrained habit can feel as fundamental as any basic need. For many, this quest for validation is particularly potent when directed toward those who sculpted our earliest selves, our parents. Should their affection have felt contingent, or their actions inflicted wounds, we may unconsciously harbor the belief that our intrinsic value is tethered to their opinion or to their eventual embrace of who we are. We might ponder if only they would voice their pride, or if only they could perceive that I am not the person they censured, then perhaps a genuine sense of self-worth might finally dawn. Yet, it is precisely here that the most formidable obstacle to our peace and completeness resides. When we defer to another, especially one who has caused us pain, the granting of permission to love ourselves, we are, in essence, surrendering the keys to our innermost sanctuary. We declare, "My worth is contingent upon your decree." This can ensnare us in a perpetual state of inertia, ceaselessly soliciting an acknowledgement that may never materialize, or a absolution that may remain forever withheld. It is akin to an infant adrift from its guardians. In that primal vulnerability, the world becomes a terrifyingly unstable expanse, and the yearning for their presence feels like a matter of existential survival. We carry forward that ancient echo of needing external anchors for our very sense of being. This learned reliance on external figures for our sense of worth is a formidable current. It shapes our self-perception, dictates our responses to censure, and colors our interpretation of silence. If a parent's words were sharp, we may find those same barbs resonating within our own minds, whispering inadequacy or a lack of capability. If their approval was a hard-won prize, we might dedicate our lives to the pursuit of that same elusive feeling of sufficiency in the eyes of others. This is not a testament to our deficiency, but rather a profoundly human response to formative experiences. We learn to calibrate our value by the reflections we discerned in the gazes of those closest to us. The imperative, then, is to recognize this entrenched pattern and consciously begin to redirect our focus inward. It is about comprehending that the authority we have relinquished can be reclaimed. We can actively challenge the specific criticisms that have taken root within our consciousness. Consider those persistent, gnawing thoughts that proclaim your inadequacy, or that you have committed an irrecoverable transgression. Where did these voices first originate? More often than not, they are echoes of pronouncements made or sentiments implied by individuals whose opinions held immense sway during our formative years. To counteract these internalized critiques, we must cultivate ourselves as our most benevolent advocate. This is the province of internal affirmation. It is not an exercise in facile positivity, but rather a deliberate act of speaking truth to ourselves, a truth that can supplant the old, injurious narratives. When that inner voice insinuates, you are a failure, you can gently, resolutely, and consistently counter, I am in a process of learning and growth, and my worth is not defined by my missteps. When you feel the sting of past judgment, you can affirm, I am whole, precisely as I am in this moment. These affirmations serve as instruments of reprogramming. They are akin to sowing new seeds in the fertile soil of your mind, seeds of self-compassion and inherent worth, which will, in time, grow robust enough to displace the weeds of self-doubt. Articulate them aloud. Inscribe them. Repeat them until they transcend mere words and become a quiet, intrinsic knowing. Declarations such as, I deserve love, my feelings are valid, I am worthy of kindness, or the simple, profound, I am enough, are not merely pleasantries. They are acts of bravery and self-reclamation. They represent your reclaiming the power to define yourself, a power that was never genuinely theirs to possess in the first place. This journey toward self-acceptance does not necessitate the erasure of the past, nor the minimization of its hurts. It is not about obliterating pain or denying the reality of what transpired. Rather, it involves acknowledging the wound, comprehending its impact, and then consciously choosing not to permit that wound to dictate your present identity. Consider it akin to a scar. A scar bears witness to healing, to resilience. It is a component of you, yet it does not define the living tissue that surrounds it, nor does it impede your capacity to move and flourish. To embrace the hurt without allowing it to define you means confronting your past experiences, the arduous relationships, the moments of rejection, the times you felt misunderstood, and declaring, this occurred. It was painful. It shaped me in specific ways. And now, I choose not to let it be the final arbiter of my value. It is about understanding the emotional residue of those past wounds, the lingering sadness, the fear, the anger, and learning to process them without permitting them to become the lens through which you perceive yourself. It is an act of integration, not eradication. You are not striving to expunge segments of your narrative. You are learning to hold your entire story, including its arduous chapters, with a newfound depth of self-compassion and acceptance. The pivotal transformation occurs when we transition from a conditional framework of self-love to an unconditional one. This is the distinction between proclaiming, I will love myself if I achieve this goal, or I will love myself if they finally recognize my worth, and instead embracing the immutable truth, I love myself because I am inherently worthy, simply by virtue of my existence. This is the very essence of unconditional self-love. It is the recognition that your worth is not a price to be attained or a status to be earned. It is your birthright. When we operate within the paradigm, we are in a perpetual state of anticipation. We await the alteration of external circumstances, the validation of others, the opportune alignment of life in a manner we deem conducive to self-love. This protracted waiting is an exhausting endeavor, frequently culminating in disappointment. It keeps us tethered to the opinions and actions of others, particularly those who have inflicted pain. We remain beholden to their approval, their acknowledgement, their forgiveness. The because perspective, however, is emancipating. It signifies that you are grounding your self-love in an internal truth that is unassailable. You love yourself because you are a unique, intricate, and valuable human being. You love yourself because you possess the capacity for joy, for learning, for contributing to the world. You love yourself because you are alive, and that is sufficient. This shift reclaims agency from external sources and firmly situates it within you, where it has perpetually resided. Consider the case of Sarah. For years, Sarah experienced a persistent ache of not being enough for her father. He was a man of sharp criticism, and his disapproval felt like an oppressive shroud she could not shed. Sarah found herself ceaselessly striving to demonstrate her worth to him, altering her career paths, her relationships, even her outward appearance, all in an effort to elicit a genuine smile or a word of commendation. She harbored the conviction that if he could only perceive her as he desired, then she would finally be able to accept herself. Sarah's turning point was not marked by her father's sudden change of heart, that never truly materialized. Instead, it was during a quiet moment of introspection, following yet another disheartening exchange with him, that she recognized her profound exhaustion. She was weary of the relentless pursuit. She gazed into the mirror and, for the first time, did not see the reflection of her father's disappointment. She saw her own tired eyes and, beneath them, a nascent spark of something else, resilience. She commenced with small, deliberate actions. Rather than awaiting her father's validation, she began to bestow it upon herself. When she erred at work, instead of succumbing to self-recrimination, she would articulate, "All right, that did not unfold as anticipated. What lessons can I glean from this? I remain a person of worth and I am endeavoring my utmost." She initiated journaling, not to dissect her father's shortcomings, but to chronicle her own strengths. She recorded instances of her kindness, the adversities she had surmounted, the moments when she had experienced genuine joy. Gradually, with painstaking effort, Sarah began to dismantle the necessity of her father's approval. She came to understand that his criticisms were a reflection of his own internal struggles, not an objective assessment of her being. She acknowledged the pain his words had inflicted, the years of feeling inadequate, yet she chose not to permit that pain to define her present or her future. She was not erasing her past, she was integrating it. She was asserting, this was a challenging chapter, but it does not constitute the entirety of the narrative. The transition from if to because was palpable for Sarah. She ceased posing the question, "Will my father ever approve of me?" and began to inquire, "What do I value in myself?" She apprehended that her worth was not contingent upon his evolving opinion. It was already extant, inherent and complete. This realization did not magically mend her relationship with her father, but it profoundly altered her relationship with herself. She no longer felt like a child desperately seeking a parental blessing. She felt like an adult, capable of bestowing upon herself the love and acceptance she had perpetually craved from external sources. This undertaking demands courage. It calls upon us to confront the deeply entrenched beliefs concerning our unworthiness that have been reinforced over years, sometimes decades. It entails gazing upon the facets of ourselves that we have sought to conceal, the perceived flaws and imperfections, and extending to them kindness rather than judgment. It is about comprehending that these perceived flaws are frequently merely aspects of our human experience, not indictments of our character. So, how can you actively identify and challenge these specific internalized criticisms? Commence by attuning yourself to your inner dialogue. When a pang of self-doubt or a wave of shame washes over you, pause. Inquire of yourself, what precisely am I articulating to myself at this juncture? Record it. Then trace that thought to its origin. Whose voice does it resemble? What situation does it evoke? Frequently, you will discover the genesis of these criticisms in the pronouncements or attitudes of parents, educators, or peers from your past. Once identified, you can begin to counter them. If the criticism is, "You are not intelligent enough," you can respond with, "I possess the capacity for learning and comprehension. My intelligence is multifaceted, and I possess numerous strengths." If it is, "You are excessively sensitive," you can state, "My sensitivity enables me to connect deeply with others and with the world." It is a strength, not a frailty. The psychological mechanism by which we cede authority to external figures to dictate our self-worth is rooted in our earliest experiences of attachment and survival. As infants, our very existence hinged upon the care and approval of our primary caregivers. This primal imperative for connection and security becomes indelibly etched into our neural pathways. When these caregivers also serve as sources of criticism or conditional affection, we learn to associate our worth with their approval. We internalize their standards and their judgments as the ultimate verity. This can foster a profound fear of rejection, rendering us hypervigilant to external cues that might signal disapproval. Reclaiming this power is a deliberate process. It involves recognizing that the approval you seek from someone who has caused you pain is often not indicative of genuine affection, but rather a desperate attempt to rectify the past or achieve a sense of closure that may never be realized. You can consciously redirect that energy inward. Instead of seeking validation from them, ask yourself, what would engender a sense of pride in myself at this moment? Instead of replaying their criticisms, focus on your own values and what you deem significant. It is akin to mastering a new language, the language of self-compassion, and practicing it assiduously until it becomes your natural mode of internal communication. By actively engaging in these steps, deconstructing the need for external validation, practicing internal affirmations, and embracing our past, without allowing it to define us, we begin to dismantle the most significant impediments to our own wholeness. This conscious cultivation of self-acceptance is not a terminal destination, but rather the fertile ground from which true, unshakable self-love can blossom, a love that solicits no permission and bows to no external judgment. It is the quiet revolution that commences within, transforming how we experience ourselves and, consequently, how we navigate the world. 2. Healing from within. We often perceive healing as a passive event, a bestowal from others, particularly in the wake of hurt. We may anticipate an apology, a moment when our pain is finally seen and acknowledged, or a change in behavior that finally grants us the love we inherently deserve. It feels as though the only path to mending what is broken lies with the very hands that fractured it. But what if this waiting, this perpetual gaze outward, is precisely what ensnares us? What if it is a self-constructed prison, and the key has resided in our own pocket all along? Picture a tender, nascent seedling, straining against the unyielding earth. It does not await the sun's apology for the darkness, nor does it petition the rain for permission to descend. It simply reaches, drawing its fortitude from an intrinsic, unyielding imperative to grow. Our own journey toward healing and self-love mirrors this natural inclination. The most profound and enduring healing emanates not from external sources, but from a potent, silent revolution unfolding within. It is the dawning realization that the validation we desperately seek from others, especially those who have inflicted our wounds, is an illusion. Pursuing it is akin to attempting to fill an abyss with water from a sieve. This persistent quest for validation from those who have caused us pain actively obstructs genuine self-love and healing, for it anchors our focus to the very fount of our suffering. It is a psychological snare wherein our sense of worth becomes a pawn in a game dictated by another's rules. When we perpetually await an apology, an acknowledgement, or a shift in their demeanor, we surrender to them the authority to define our self-perception. Our self-esteem then becomes a fragile construct, beholden to their actions, their pronouncements, or even their reticence. Internally, this engenders a cycle of anticipation and subsequent disappointment. We may endlessly retrace past hurts, harboring the hope that perfect comprehension, or the other's understanding, will finally render us whole. This internal fixation on the external origin of pain perpetuates the wound's rawness. We revisit the scene of the injury repeatedly, searching for a remedy that only the perpetrator can administer. This cultivates a profound sense of powerlessness, as if our healing is wholly beyond our dominion. The specific internal mechanisms at play are rooted in a deep-seated conviction that our worth is contingent. We internalize the message that we are only deserving of love or value if certain external conditions are met, such as receiving approval or experiencing kindness from specific individuals. This stands in stark opposition to unconditional self-love, which posits that our worth is inherent. The truth is, the power to validate ourselves, to proclaim our own intrinsic value, and to bestow upon ourselves the love we yearn for resides entirely within us. This is the very essence of the internal power this book champions. It is not about resigned acceptance of our circumstances. It is an active, deliberate choice. It is akin to resolving to become your own most steadfast ally, your own most trusted confidante. You require no external sanction to believe in your inherent goodness, to recognize your own resilience, or to extend yourself. Kindness. This internal validation is a conscious act of self-affirmation. It is the internal declaration, I see you. I value you. You are enough, precisely as you are. Recall a moment when you felt a genuine sense of pride in a small accomplishment. Perhaps you finally completed a daunting task, or you managed to remain composed when the urge to lash out was overwhelming. In those instances, even if unobserved by others, you experienced a flicker of inner satisfaction, did you not? That flicker is the genesis of internal validation. It is the quiet inner voice that murmurs, "Well done." Healing from within necessitates amplifying that voice, rendering it more resonant than any external criticism or neglect you may have endured. This leads us to the practices of self-nurturing and self-compassion. These are not mere abstract ideals. They are the very instruments we employ to construct our internal validation framework. Self-compassionate self-talk is paramount here. We have often cultivated a habit of extreme self-recrimination, particularly if we were raised in environments saturated with criticism. When we falter, our internal monologue may become a torrent of harsh judgments. I am so foolish. I always ruin things. Self-compassionate self-talk involves the deliberate counteraction of this tendency. Instead of "I am so foolish," we might articulate, "This is proving difficult and I have made a mistake. It is permissible. Everyone errs. What lessons can I glean from this?" It is about extending to yourself the same grace and understanding you would offer a cherished friend navigating hardship. Establishing internal boundaries is another formidable practice. This does not entail dictating others' actions. It signifies discerning what you are prepared to accept from yourself and for yourself. It is the act of saying no to self-defeating thoughts or behaviors, and an emphatic yes to self-care. Celebrating minor internal triumphs is also indispensable. Did you opt for a nourishing meal when the allure of comfort food was strong? Did you dedicate 5 minutes to deep breathing when feeling overwhelmed? Acknowledge these small victories. They serve as tangible proof of your burgeoning capacity for self-love. Each one is a cornerstone laid in the edifice of your inner fortitude. This is where the concept of loving yourself without permission truly takes root. The imperative for permission suggests that our self-worth is conditional, that we are only permitted to embrace self-love if sanctioned by another, or if we meet certain arbitrary benchmarks. It is akin to a child inquiring, "Mom, may I go play outside?" When they possess perfectly functional limbs and an accessible yard, they await an external sign-off. Healing from within means recognizing that we inherently possess the right and the faculty to love ourselves, sans any requisite permission. Our worth is not alone requiring approval, it is an inalienable birthright. When we cease awaiting external dispensation to embrace happiness, to deem ourselves worthy, or to cultivate self-love, we reclaim our own agency. We begin to grasp that the approval we have so avidly sought from others is but a hollow echo of the love that already resides within us. It is like searching for a treasure map when the treasure lies buried in your own backyard. The act of loving oneself without permission is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of profound necessity. It forms the bedrock upon which all healthy relationships, including our relationship with ourselves, are constructed. If external validation from injurious sources does not pave the path to wholeness, what does a truly healed from within perspective manifest as, particularly when confronting persistent emotional wounds? It manifests as resilience. It manifests as inner tranquility. It manifests as the quiet assurance that arises from the knowledge that one's own worth is not tethered to another's pronouncements. When confronted with lingering emotional wounds, a healed from within perspective does not imply their instantaneous eradication. Rather, it signifies that these wounds no longer define your existence. They transmute into scars, becoming testaments to battles waged and survived, rather than open abrasions that bleed anew with every touch. The practice involves tending to these wounds with self-compassion. If a memory resurfaces and evokes pain, Rather than suppressing it or berating yourself for experiencing it, you might acknowledge it with gentleness. Ah, there is that old hurt. It still lingers, and that is acceptable. It is a part of my narrative. Yet, it need not dictate my present. You might then engage in a self-soothing activity, perhaps immersing yourself in calming music, journaling your thoughts, or simply taking a few deep, centering breaths. The focus shifts from the external source of the pain to your internal capacity for coping and self-comfort. Consider the analogy of the inner child. Envision an infant, utterly dependent and imbued with innocence. This infant merits love, security, and care simply by virtue of its existence. It does not need to earn it. It does not need to perform. It requires no permission to be loved. Our inner child, that facet of ourselves that crashes our deepest needs, our vulnerabilities, and our capacity for joy, is precisely like that infant. It warrants unconditional acceptance and love from ourselves, irrespective of past experiences or the actions of primary caregivers. If our caregivers were incapable of providing that love, it is a profound tragedy, yet it does not diminish that inner child's inherent deservingness. Healing transpires when we, as adults, assume the role of the loving, protective, and validating caregiver for our own inner child. This entails a deliberate choice to nurture that aspect of ourselves that may have been neglected or wounded. It involves attending to its needs, validating its emotions, and reassuring it that it is safe and cherished. This is not about forgetting past transgressions or feigning their absence. It is about acknowledging the pain and then consciously opting to offer ourselves the love and validation that was conspicuously absent. It is about recognizing that we possess the inherent capacity to provide ourselves with what others may have been unable to. What are the concrete, actionable steps a reader can undertake today to commence the cultivation of internal validation, even when confronted with deeply ingrained patterns of self-doubt or the absence of external affirmation? Firstly, begin with your thoughts. Cultivate an awareness of your inner monologue. When you detect yourself engaging in self-criticism, pause. Inquire of yourself, would I utter these words to a friend I hold dear? If the answer is no, then consciously reframe the thought. Transform I am so inept at this into this is challenging, and I am in the process of learning. Secondly, practice small acts of self-care as affirmations. This is not about grand gestures. It is about choosing to drink a glass of water when thirsty, taking a few moments to stretch when your body feels stiff, or stepping outside for a breath of fresh air when feeling overwhelmed. Each minor act is a declaration, my well-being holds significance. Thirdly, journal your internal victories. At the conclusion of each day, document one thing you accomplished that felt gratifying, one moment you demonstrated kindness to yourself, or one challenge you successfully navigated. This constructs a record of your own competence and self-compassion. Fourthly, consciously relinquish the need for external approval in one minor domain. Select something for which you typically seek validation, perhaps posting a photograph online or soliciting an opinion on a decision. This time, endeavor to make the decision or feel content with it based on your own internal compass, without soliciting external feedback. Observe how this feels. It may evoke discomfort initially, but with practice, it transforms into empowerment. Finally, engage in mindful self-compassion. When experiencing despondency or difficulty, consciously place a hand over your heart and articulate to yourself, may I extend kindness to myself in this moment. May I accept myself as I am. This simple physical gesture can be profoundly grounding and validating. By actively choosing to nurture and validate ourselves from within, we commence the dismantling of the very foundations of external dependency. This internal metamorphosis does not erase the past, but it reclaims our present and empowers us to forge a future wherein our self-worth is unassailable. A future wherein the love we bestow upon ourselves serves as the most potent force for our own peace and completeness. This reclaimed power then enables us to explore how this internal strength can redefine our relationships with others, even those who have inflicted pain upon us. 3. Loving yourself without limits. We often frame love as a commodity, something to be acquired from others. We await a parent's nod of approval, a partner's tender words, or a friend's steadfast support. When these are withheld, or worse, met with criticism or injury, it feels as if a fragment of our intrinsic worth has been chipped away. We begin to equate our capacity for self-love with these external affirmations. This is precisely where we erect invisible ramparts around our hearts. We whisper to ourselves, "I will find happiness when," or "I will finally love myself once." These are the insidious, if then pronouncements of self-condemnation. I will love myself if my parents finally grasp my perspective. I will love myself if I secure that promotion. I will love myself if the one who wounded me offers an apology. These stipulated conditions function as tiny latches on a treasure chest, with us holding the sole key. Yet, the treasure within our inherent worth and boundless capacity for self-love is already complete. We simply fail to perceive it. So engrossed are we in seeking permission to unlock the chest from individuals who may not even possess the correct key themselves. Consider this. How many times have you found yourself poised for a sign, a word, a gesture from someone whose opinion you desperately covet, particularly if they have been a source of past pain? It is a profoundly human inclination to seek validation, to yearn to be seen and embraced, especially by those who have sculpted our formative years. It's as if a part of us believes their affirmation is the sole architect of our restored wholeness. However, this is a cunning ruse our minds employ. It is akin to a child who has misplaced a cherished toy. Though the toy is gone, the child remains. They are still a complete being, capable of joy and affection, irrespective of that specific loss. Similarly, our innate worth does not vanish simply because another's actions or words failed to affirm it. The faculty for love, for self-acceptance, is not a gift that can be pilfered or withheld by others. It is an internal wellspring, existing within each of us by virtue of our very being. This is the very essence of unconditional self-love, the profound recognition that your worth is not subject to debate. It is not earned. It is not contingent upon another's performance or pronouncements. You are whole. You are deserving of love. And you are, in this very moment, precisely as you are, good enough. This is not a saccharine platitude. It is a fundamental truth that, once grasped, possesses the power to dismantle the most entrenched barriers to your peace. When we operate under the sway of offend thinking, we are, in essence, surrendering our power. We are proclaiming, "My self-love is beholden to you. My happiness is tethered to your actions." This is why the opinions and behaviors of others, particularly those who have inflicted pain, can wield such devastating influence. We have, unconsciously, handed them the remote control to our emotional landscape. Take Sarah's experience, for instance. For years, Sarah harbored a gnawing sense of inadequacy, stemming from her father's infrequent presence and frequent criticism. Her if-then decree was stark. "I will love myself if my father finally declares his pride in me." She dedicated decades to chasing his approval, striving for the role of the perfect daughter, the accomplished professional, the one who could finally elicit his praise. Each time he offered a backhanded compliment or remained silent, her self-esteem would plummet. She felt paralyzed, unable to advance in her own life, so inextricably bound was she to the possibility of his affirmation. Sarah's narrative resonates universally. We might be waiting for a parent to acknowledge our struggles, a former friend to offer amends for betrayal, or even a stranger to cease their judgment. The common denominator is our outsourcing of self-acceptance. We await external validation to ratify what should already be an internal knowing. But what if we redirected our focus from the external to the internal? What if we began to perceive that the power to love ourselves does not emanate from a parent's praise, a partner's affection, or a friend's loyalty? What if it simply originates from within us? You require no one else's sanction to be worthy. You need no stamp of approval from the past. You need only yourself. This does not imply a denial of past hurts. It does not necessitate an absolution of harmful conduct. Radical acceptance of past wounds involves acknowledging their reality and their impact, while steadfastly refusing to let them dictate our present or future capacity for self-love. It is an act of declaring, yes, this pain occurred. It was agonizing. And even amidst that pain, I choose to love myself. This choice is potent. It is the reclamation of the power we have relinquished. It is the recognition that the hurt was an event, not an identity. It was something that happened to you, not something that defines the core of who you are. Your core is inherently good, inherently whole, and inherently deserving of love. When we can embrace this truth, the grip of offend statements begins to loosen. The yearning for external validation may still flicker, but it no longer possesses the power to obstruct us. We can acknowledge it, perhaps even articulate, it would be pleasant to hear that from them, but it ceases to be a prerequisite for our own self-love. It no longer acts as the gatekeeper to our peace. Envision this. The hurt you experienced is akin to a tempest that swept through your life. It may have wrought damage, it may have reshaped the landscape, but the foundation of your dwelling, your intrinsic self, remains unyielding. Unconditional self-love is the endeavor of reconstructing, repairing, and cherishing that foundation, rather than passively awaiting the storm's miraculous dissipation, or the arrival of someone else bearing blueprints. The analytical query then arises: how do we commence the identification and reclamation of the power we have ceded to external sources? It begins with awareness. Pay keen attention to your internal monologue. When does your self-esteem falter? What thoughts surface? Are they inextricably linked to another's actions or opinions? Are you anticipating a specific utterance or deed from someone before granting yourself permission to feel well? Once these patterns are discerned, you can commence their challenge. When the thought arises, I will feel better when X transpires, gently interject with, alternatively, I can choose to feel well in this very moment, by embracing myself. This is not an exercise in forced gaiety, but a deliberate choice to release dependency. This process is a practice. It is akin to cultivating a muscle. The more frequently you opt for self-validation, the more robust that internal faculty of self-love becomes. You will begin to notice your capacity to withstand criticism without fracturing. You can experience disappointment without allowing it to define you. You can extend forgiveness to others, not for their benefit, but for your own, liberating yourself from the burden of resentment that binds you to their actions. The most prevalent if-then conditions we impose upon our self-love are deeply ingrained. They frequently originate from childhood experiences, societal pressures, and the painful lessons gleaned from challenging relationships. These conditions erect invisible barriers by convincing us that our worth is something to be achieved or earned, rather than an inherent possession. For instance, a child consistently told they were too sensitive or too boisterous might internalize the belief that their genuine feelings or authentic expression are unacceptable. Their if then transforms into, I will love myself if I am quiet and compliant. This condition actively inhibits them from embracing their full personality, obstructing their access to the wholeness that arises from accepting all facets of themselves. Another pervasive impediment is the conviction that we must attain perfection before we can merit love. We perceive our own imperfections, a perceived deficit in intelligence, a physical attribute we disdain, a past misstep that haunts us, and declare, I will be worthy of love when I rectify this. This constitutes a formidable blockade, as it establishes an unattainable standard. Perfection is an illusion. Our imperfections are not flaws, they are integral components of the rich tapestry that constitutes our being. When we withhold love from ourselves until we are perfect, we are, in effect, denying ourselves love indefinitely. The mechanism of this blockage is both simple and profound. These if-then pronouncements foster a perpetual state of anticipation. We are perpetually gazing toward a future where our stipulated conditions are met, rather than apprehending the present reality of our inherent worth. This waiting keeps us immobilized, preventing us from accessing the deep, unwavering acceptance that is our birthright. It is akin to standing at the precipice of a vast ocean, yet refusing to venture in, awaiting someone's decree that the water is sufficiently warm. The water is always warm enough. One simply needs to take the plunge. Reclaiming the power we have relinquished is an active undertaking. It necessitates a conscious redirection of our energy. Instead of seeking validation from those who have caused us harm, we can begin to pose ourselves the questions: what do I need to hear at this juncture? What affirmation would be most beneficial for me? This pivot is critical. It involves turning our gaze inward. For example, if your father's critiques consistently rendered you feeling inadequate, rather than replaying his words in your mind and wishing for a different pronouncement, you can consciously elect to counter those ingrained narratives. When you detect that familiar tendril of doubt encroaching, you can pause and affirm to yourself, with as much sincerity as you can muster, "My father's opinion does not define my worth. I am capable. I am valuable." This is not about negating past hurt, but about actively constructing a new internal narrative grounded in self-acceptance. This practice also entails the establishment of boundaries. If certain relationships consistently leave you feeling depleted and devalued, it may become incumbent upon you to create distance, not as a punitive measure, but as a means of safeguarding your nascent sense of self-worth. This is not about severing ties permanently, but about carving out space for your own healing and maturation. It is the act of stating, "I value myself sufficiently to limit exposure to influences that consistently erode my foundation." The crux of this reclamation resides in the simple yet profound realization: you require no one. You require only yourself. This is not an exhortation to isolation. It is an affirmation of your self-sufficiency within the domain of self-love. It signifies the understanding that while connection and support are indeed invaluable, they serve as augmentations to your self-love, not its genesis. Your capacity to love yourself is an internal reservoir capable of sustaining you through any external circumstance. To unearth this internal wellspring, we must actively cultivate it. This entails engaging in self-care not as a luxury, but as an imperative. It means attuning to your body and your emotions, honoring your needs, and treating yourself with the same kindness and compassion you would extend to a cherished friend. It involves celebrating your minor triumphs, acknowledging your efforts, and offering yourself grace when you falter. The affirmations, "You are whole," "You deserve love," and "You are good enough" are not mere words. They are potent anchors capable of tethering you to your inherent truth. Recite them with frequency. Transcribe them. Allow them to permeate your being. They stand as powerful reminders that your worth is not contingent upon external factors. It is an absolute. When we can truly embody this, the dread of not being loved by others loses its potency. We can engage in relationships from a position of abundance, not deficit. We can offer love and support to others because we possess it to give, not because we are desperately seeking to fill an internal void. This journey of loving oneself without constraint is not about erasing the past or denying its pain. It is about acknowledging that the past need not dictate your present or your future. It is about comprehending that the hurt you may have endured, the criticisms you may have weathered, the rejections you may have experienced, none of these can truly impede your capacity for self-love. They may linger as painful memories, they may leave scars, but they cannot extinguish the inherent luminescence of your worth. Consider it thus: all those things, the hurts, the criticisms, the absence of validation, you could perceive them, and it would be agreeable to hear them or experience them differently. It would feel pleasant. But they do not have to impede you. Nothing can. For the power to love yourself is not something that can be wrested away by another's actions. Conclusion: the journey through these pages has been one of unveiling, of gently peeling back the layers that may have obscured a fundamental truth: your capacity for love especially for yourself, is an inner wellspring, never dependent on the approval of others. We've explored how the deep, unwavering acceptance and appreciation of yourself, regardless of what life throws your way or what anyone else thinks or does, is not a distant dream, but an inherent power waiting to be recognized. This is the heart of unconditional self-love, the idea that your worth is complete simply because you exist, and that the greatest permission you will ever receive is the one you grant yourself. We've seen how the need for external validation, whether from parents, partners, or even strangers, creates unnecessary barriers to the wholeness and peace that are your birthright. Throughout our time together, we've deconstructed the subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, ways we've been conditioned to seek external approval. We've looked at how the echoes of past hurts can make us feel like we're still waiting for a nod from those who may have caused us pain, or how societal expectations can whisper that we're not enough unless we achieve certain things or fit certain molds. But the profound insight we've uncovered is that your inner authority is sovereign. Your worth isn't a loan from someone else that can be recalled. It's an intrinsic part of your being, much like the very air you breathe. Remember the analogy of a baby. Their wholeness, their deservingness of love, is not contingent on their parents' presence or approval. They simply are, and in that being, they are complete. This is the essence of reclaiming your inner authority. And central to this reclamation is the practice of self-compassion. It's about turning that gentle, understanding gaze you'd offer a dear friend towards yourself, especially when you stumble or when old wounds ache. This kindness is not a weakness, it is the very foundation upon which unconditional self-love is built. Setting boundaries, too, is a profound act of self-love. It's about protecting your inner space and honoring your needs, even from the persistent voice of your own inner critic. And in embracing your imperfections, you step into a truer form of wholeness, shedding the exhausting pursuit of an unattainable perfection. The real magic happens when this internal shift takes root. It's a feeling of liberation, of finally coming home to yourself. It's not about acquiring something new from the outside, but about recognizing what has always been within. This is the profound realization of unconditional self-love, the quiet, steady hum of knowing you are enough, exactly as you are, independent of any external circumstance or the fleeting opinions of others. It's the courage to whisper, or even to shout, "I love myself, not because I've earned it, not because someone finally validated me, but simply because I exist." This is the permission you've been seeking, and it originates from your own core. This internal realignment is what dismantles the biggest barrier to your personal wholeness and peace. The desperate need for external validation begins to fade, like a phantom limb that no longer aches. You are no longer a ship constantly seeking a harbor in others. You are the harbor itself. Of course, the path to truly living from this place of unconditional self-love is a practice, not a final destination. There will be moments when old patterns resurface, when the whispers of doubt try to regain a foothold. This is not a sign of failure, but an invitation to deepen your practice. When these moments arise, remember the gentle hand of self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same patience and understanding you would extend to a loved one navigating a difficult time. View these moments not as setbacks, but as opportunities to reinforce your inner strength, to remind yourself that your resilience is greater than any temporary storm. As you move forward, carrying these insights, I encourage you to actively embody the unblocked heart. Trust your intuition. Honor your deepest needs. Pursue your passions with a quiet confidence that doesn't require applause. Living from this place of unconditional self-love is not only a profound act of self-respect, but a radiant gift to the world around you. You are now equipped with the understanding that unconditional self-love is your birthright. It is the fuel for your authentic life, the quiet engine that powers your unique journey. Your heart is unblocked. Your worth is undeniable. You are whole, you are loved, and you are enough. Go forth and live from this truth.